Hello and welcome once again to the show with me, your host, Johnny. And as always, I'm joined by my good friend, LD. How are you doing, sir?
Hey man, blessed, highly favored, all good, man, all
I
good
love
over
that
here.
saying, blessed and highly favored. That's good. As always, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up. Press the subscribe button. Join us on our journey of the discussion where we talk about different subjects. If there's anything you think you'd like us to talk about, please, by all means, let us know in the comments, and we will no doubt have an opinion. Because I mean, we've got an opinion on pretty much everything. We can
Any
talk about it.
topic, any
Yeah,
topic.
exactly. So today we are going to be talking about the struggle that millions of people today have, especially young people, in getting themselves on the housing ladder, and why we are pretty much in the mess that we are in today. I don't know if you have any opinions as to why it is so difficult for people in general to be able to purchase a home. If you've got your own opinion, by all means, once again, put it in the comments and share it with us, because it'd be
Drop a
really good
comment.
for us to know. I mean, we've got our own opinions as to why, why we are in the mess that we're in today. I hope that we'll be able to talk about some of those things and bring them out. Now, most of the things that we will be talking about today, they do pertain to the UK, but it's not limited to the United Kingdom. These are things that happen all over the world. There are lots of countries that are in the exact same situation that we are here in the UK. We are going to be cracking on. I know it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add before we carry on, but please, jump in at any moment.
Nah, no worries, man. I mean, you're right. What I would reiterate is that it is a global
Yeah,
situation at the moment. So, you know, we've got people that are coming here because other parts of the Europe, they're going through the same struggle. Places
yeah,
like Greece, people are coming over here for work,
yeah,
and they're still not going to be able to buy. They're just renters as well. So,
yeah.
in America, I speak to family members over there.
Hmm.
Everybody's going through the same. Luckily, a lot of people have been able to help out and get people on. But for the average person, if you're on an
Very,
average
very,
wage,
yeah.
you're
It's
not.
very difficult.
Yeah,
So they say that housing in the UK is the largest non-financial asset class in the UK. So once you put all the finances, your home is worth in total over in the UK trillions of pounds. Like the research that I've done just on this subject literally said that the housing market, it's trillions. So it tells you just how much worth there is in bricks and mortar. Statistics show that 30% of homes in the UK are owned outright. No mortgage. This is, I own the land, I own the house, it's mine. 40% are owner occupiers that are mortgaged. They are, paying, the bank on a monthly basis to be able to buy their home, and eventually they'll be part of that 30%. It will probably increase. 18% are in social housing, so they're renting to a council, housing association, that kind of thing, and the remaining 12% are renting privately. So those are the statistics that we have as we are right now. You know that I love to do my research, so I've got loads of little gems I'm going to drop in at certain points. But if you want to, by all means, please drop in, and if you've got anything you want to say, please let me know. If you like what you hear so far, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the
hit the
channel.
thumbs up.
Yes, 100%.
Mhm.
So I monologue, so I know. So if you cut me at any moment, LD, because you know what I'm like.
I'm gonna cut you. Yeah.
Yes, good. Um, this mess that we are in right now, and I mean most young people today, and not just young people in general, working people, they will be scratching their heads trying to work out, where did this all go wrong? Like, what's happened? How is it that I'm working 9 to 5 and I've got a good job? This isn't just about, oh, I'm not earning enough money. There are people that are actually in really good jobs, and they still are not even able to buy their own home. So where did this mess, where did it begin? Well, I know. Go on, LD. What was you going to say? I could just hear you. I could hear the cogs going through. What was you just about?
No, that's a big answer. If you've got the answer to that, I'm all ears, man.
Well, there's a little bit of a story. Now, you know what I'm like. You know I do.
How far back are you going to go?
I'm going back. You come on. You know me. You know that this. You've known me long enough to know that when it comes to discussions and things like this, there is no point only touching the surface. You have to find the core, because in many ways, if you don't find the core, you're going to repeat those mistakes again. You know, there's no point just dealing with, dealing with the problem after it's happened. You need to see
it's got to be
where did this come
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
And so obviously I've done enough research that I think I've got a rough idea as to where this problem went wrong. But actually, it's quite surprising when you realize what actually happened and why it could quite easily happen again in the future.
Oh, we're talking housing bubbles.
100. Well, we're gonna talk about that as well. We always do this. We always have these conversations, and somewhere along the line, we touch something that's in my G file. I've still got A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G's there, and then you go housing bubble, like not yet.
We'll jump about a little bit, but we'll bring it round. We'll bring it back around.
So we're going back. I'm going to take you back
timeline.
We're going to go on a timeline now. Historically, right? Most people in general, I'm talking going back before like the Industrial Revolution. So for those of you, if you know the Victorian era, we're talking just when people just started to become, a little bit more industrial. They started to work out steam engines. They started to work out the railroad, and they were able to stop using slaves, that kind of thing, when they kind of worked out that actually we can use machinery. We don't need to use humans. Well, before that time, most people lived in farms, towns. The likelihood was that they would either take over the family home or they would build a house on the family land. That was how it was for millennia. People, I was born in that house. My grandfather was born in that house. My great-great-grandfather was born in that house. We've owned this land forever, to the point where the area would have been named after the people that live there. We live in counties. In the UK, we have counties, and they're named after famous families. They're named after, the House of Buckingham, the House of Wessex, the House of Sussex. These were people. They owned the land. They lived there forever, and they literally, their blood drained into the earth. Well, the Industrial Revolution changed all of that, because people started to leave those little farms and those little towns, and they started to congregate in big numbers in cities. And I'm not saying there weren't cities before, because there's always been cities, but on a monumental scale, on a huge scale. We're talking million, 500,000, million, that kind of large numbers of people. The Industrial Revolution built, with the factories, they needed to live close to where they worked. So they started to build these big factories, and cities started to grow. Now, in those days, private renting from housing landlords was like the dominant way people lived. There was never going to be enough houses, and so you get slums. And you'll see the pictures of, kids, those chimney sweeps, the youngsters, and they live in houses, and there's like 30 of them in a road with tenements, these tenants are living there and they're struggling, and it was really difficult in those early years. And you had, especially in London, you had like Jewish communities, Chinese communities, Irish communities, and they all gravitated to the major cities like London, Birmingham, Bristol, Liverpool, those kinds of cities. In the UK, obviously, this is not specific just to the United Kingdom. In America, they had the same thing. And obviously in countries around Europe, They were going through very similar experiences as soon as they started to industrialize. So anyway, but that's not a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is not a good thing, because with those slums came, children. The mortality rate for kids was bad.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? You had 11 kids, and maybe, just maybe, 9 of them would live. One of them would have, leprosy or tuberculosis or something. There would be something. One of them would get wiped out. Or maybe 3 of them get wiped out, because obviously the sanitation wasn't the best. It wasn't really, it wasn't great. And those people, those slums, you've seen images of those slums. They're terrible. They're horrible, which kind of scares me, because we're seeing things like that now. We're right now, we've gone full circle. It's happening again. We're repeating the mistakes of our, forebears. So,
sorry, it's interesting what you just said there about coming back full circle, because what you said at the beginning was the Industrial Revolution was when they no longer needed the slaves or indentured servitude, and went to machinery. And now we don't need people, we're going to AI.
Exactly. So
it's full circle. It's come back.
So technology. It's come back. It's a different way, isn't it?
Technological shift.
Yeah, 100%. There is a shift, and we went from a very, is it agrarian lifestyle? We became industrial. We started to build machines that could do things that would take, the man and his ox didn't need to plow the field. He would now be able to use a steam operated engine to be able to do that. The cotton didn't need to be picked by a slave. They could pretty much get, machinery that could lift that off and actually weave the machine, weave that cotton and make it into the, clothing that the Victorians loved to wear. So you imagine these slums in, as I said, we speak about United Kingdom. Those slums were quite common. Lots of people lived in those areas, but it was terrible. It was really, really bad. And they were paying rent. And at that time, up until the First World War, so keeping in mind from the Victorian age up until about 1914, 90% of people were privately renting. There wasn't the social housing we have today. It was, it was.
Sorry, go back again. Say the time scale again.
So from the Victorian age up until the First World War, so from the Victorian times, which is like the 18th centuries, all the way up to 1914, 90% of people that lived in those areas were renters. They did not own their properties. There were landowners, and there were people that were tenants.
The landowners was the rentier class, basically.
Exactly, right? The gentry. They were the ones that owned the land. It was in their family name. They would only be able to give it to someone in their family name. So you couldn't own land. You could only, I think they call it a lodal title. You literally were going to rent until you die. Or if you were lucky, you would have got on a boat and gone to America, to try and get a better life and move and try and improve your life, which is obviously what happened to the Irish when they had the Blight. They left Ireland en masse because of the political situation they had over there, where, you just couldn't own land. Your land just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you had nothing left, and you couldn't.
90% is crazy.
But that's the statistic, 90%. So that's the picture. Now, I know I said to you that we're going to get to modern day. So before you think, why has it gone all the way back then? It's because you have to go all the way back then to understand the mess that we're in today. So in 1918, so this is now the end of the First World War. Yeah. So you have a lot, millions of young men coming home. They've been in Passchendaele. They've been out on the Somme. They have been fighting for king and country. And now the war's over and they're coming home. And when they come home, they're coming home to their loves. They want to start a family. They want to be able to enjoy the fruitage of the hard labor. 4 years in a trench is not easy. You and I have no concept of how difficult it must have been for those men and women, but to go over there and fight, So they've come back now,
Yep.
but at the same time that this is happening, if you think about what was going on in Europe, you've got communism, which has just overthrown the royal family, taken the Romanovs and put them in a bunker somewhere and blown their brains out. You've got political unrest in the rest of Europe. The UK government are thinking, hang on, 1 million trained young men coming home. We can't really let them still be annoyed at their lot in life. These are well trained. We can't allow them to be writing about living conditions. So, and the government are smart and I can't knock them. They had the right mentality. They set out regulations to build terraced houses. And I was going to say to you, when I was doing my research, I was going to say to you, have you not noticed that you might go from one area and travel to a completely different area and the houses look the same? And it throws hang on. Like, I remember going to I remember visiting a friend in Eltham, around that area, Bellingham. And I met in South London, and I remember thinking, oh wow, it's a big estate. All these houses were similar. Then I went to visit a friend in Dagenham, maybe 10, 15 years later, and it felt like I was in Bellingham. I felt like I'm in the same area because these houses were all built at that time to cater for these young
Catford, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To cater for some of these men that were going to be coming back. And they said that, and I wrote it down, these terraced houses, they needed to be spaced at 70 feet at a density of 12 houses to an acre. So there was a method to the design of these houses. They
literally oh wow.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Honestly, it was quite. When I was going through the research, I was like, and it's funny. By no means am I a scholar. I'm not skilled. I'm just an average guy. But this information was out there, and it just intrigued me. And I just thought, wow, I didn't know this before.
12 houses to an acre.
Yeah, 12 houses to an acre. That was the design. That was the designated specifics. And actually, I think I probably still have it on my.
So they're sitting down thinking, okay, a family of 4, so man, wife, 2 children, 4 times 12, 48 people to live on on an acre's worth of space, right?
Yeah, so it was literally for the working class. They broke it down into obviously 12 homes. I think it was the Tudor Water Report of 1918. It set the standard for council house design. Wow. Which actually controlled how we built houses for the next 90 years. This was not updated until 2008.
What?
Yeah. So it literally said that it requires local authorities to survey the housing needs and build houses to replace the slums. The Treasury would subside the low rent. So we'll get to that. But it was a 3-bedroom house, kitchen, bathroom, parlor, electric lighting, gas cooker, often built in council areas. The biggest one was in Becontree, in the outer suburbs of London, which had 22,000 people. Sorry, 22,000 houses holding 103,000 residents. So we're talking, these were big projects, massive projects, and they built these houses by the bucket load. In fact, they were building because they recognized that the population was growing. We had kind of moved away from that industrial age, and we'd now gone into the modern era of the 1900s. We had thousands of working men who had gone to war, and now they were home, and now we need we need them to have jobs. We need them to do things. So are we going to make them plumbers? We make them builders. We're going to make them laborers. We need them to be building houses. And it worked. It got rid of the slums. Because remember, at the beginning, the one thing they wanted to do was avoid political strife. They didn't want, when those guys came home, for they started marching and maybe get our royal family and put a bullet in their head, like
Well,
what they did to
we look at France and then start getting ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And so they got ahead of the curve and built these homes. Now, this is perfect, absolutely perfect, until 1938. Because Hitler and his Nazi colleagues managed to destroy 500,000 of those houses that they built during the Blitz. Hitler was not stupid. He knew, I can't maybe beat these soldiers on mainland Europe, but I can make them wish they were home if I blow up their home. So that's what he did. He targeted their homes. Do you know when you hear about the Blitz? I don't know if you've ever. I've always gone, oh, it's just war. No.
Yeah, I'm not too.
But this is what I mean. It was for me. It was just, oh, Hitler just got some planes and and he sent some bombs over and he blew. No, he recognized that Britain had done something to keep the masses happy. He gave them the opportunity to be able to live in relative peace in their own home. They could claim it as their own, because in Europe, they were still doing the whole feudal system. They were still, this is my land. You're a tenant. You don't own you don't own nothing. You pay me rent. Britain had moved on. There were more people owning homes at that time. And so Hitler decided to wipe out as many of those houses and people, obviously, as he could. Now, what they were saying was that they needed 3 million houses at that time, when our population was only like 45 million or whatever it was. We needed 3 million houses being built back then. And he destroyed 500,000 of them almost in that very short period of time. The other issue was that we couldn't build new houses because the problem was we couldn't build new houses because those builders were fighting. So you imagine it. Hitler's destroying the houses.
Yeah, of course.
The builders and the laborers and the plumbers, and the electricians and all of those people that we need.
They're out.
They're already out. There is no one else. So you think about it. We have got to the point where we're now lacking builders and we're lacking homes because of the Germans.
Yep.
So that's my first point.
Okay. Yeah.
Not enough houses have been built. So
that timeline is starting from the 30s to 40s, right?
Yes. So from that moment on, so end of the war, obviously, we've
so what you're saying is we've always been playing catch up, is what you're saying.
We've been playing
from that point.
From that point, we've been playing catch up. But, and as we will discuss, it's by design. Because we're going to get
just about to say that
we're going to get to the meat because this is obviously, and again, and this is the beauty of doing your own research. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, and there's part of it is fact and part of it is my own personal opinion. And you have to decide whether or not I think that makes sense. Oh, I don't think that makes sense. Let me do my own research, and by all means, please do. But at this moment in time, you have now got a country where you don't have enough houses being built. You don't. So the end of the war it's not like the end of the First World War. At the end of the Second World War, we're broke. See, the First World War was fought, in Belgium and France, and I don't know where else it was fought. Netherlands, maybe, I'm not quite sure. But ultimately, it was a war on the mainland and it was between soldiers, with the occasional bombing here, there, and everywhere. But generally, it was soldier to soldier. The Second World War was total warfare. It was, I'm going to blow up your house where you live. I'm going to blow it to smithereens. I'm going to kill your mother. I'm going to kill your grandfather. I'm going to blow up the grave that your great grandfather is buried in. I'm going to blow up the church. Do you know what I mean? We're talking.
It's like a Liam Neeson film.
Yeah, this is, yes, I will find you. I will destroy you. That kind of thing. Yeah. So when those soldiers come back now there's no money. There's no input to, do you know what? We need to get back on that program of building millions and millions of houses. They just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. And so we have, so then, fair play, Labour comes in and they realize that they need to have a structure.
Sorry, just again for myself. 500,000 were destroyed.
Yes.
And at that point, they needed 3 million.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
So they were
2.5 million down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then under a Labour government, I believe it's a Labour government. I may be wrong. I'd have to do research. But I think under a Labour government, they brought in all the things like the NHS and all these other institutions to help social care. And one of those things was to build social housing.
Yes.
Build more houses, build as many houses as we can. And they did. Croydon, New Addington, Bellingham, all these places were built to cater for, the lack of housing being built. And obviously, they didn't build enough. They just did not build enough houses. But they were building houses. They were. But they were building houses that the average man and woman could rent. Because we are still talking about a rent-focused economy. We're not talking about a homeowner economy. Home ownership is an experiment, and I know I use that word a lot because and I probably will be. I'll get crucified for saying this, but when you look at history, don't look at only 20 years. Don't only look at 40 years. You have to look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is if for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, people didn't own their home and they paid a rent because they were a tenant, then if we suddenly start buying houses, we're doing something different. And so we don't know what the result of that will be because we're still I'm not quite sure where this goes. What happens next? We don't know. So then fast forward the 50s, the 60s, the swinging 60s, the 70s, all of the issues that started to happen, we get to, again, our era, and then you get you get Reagan in America, you get Thatcher over here. She's looking at these big organizations, British Gas, British Rail, British Telecom. She's looking at all of the,
just before you hit the 80s.
Yeah.
Right. So 3.5 decades after the end of the Second World War.
Yeah.
Government, local authorities, housing associations built 4.4 million social homes.
Yeah, in the entirety.
In that time, yes. So
Yeah.
that was at an average of 125,000 a year.
Yeah,
but
not enough.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Not
obviously you've got population growing, having babies, immigration.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So that was staggered, to say the least.
Yeah. So you imagine they don't build enough houses, but they need so they need people to be able to they need the economy to run. So during the 60s and 70s, obviously, they opened up their doors to the Commonwealth. They want to get more people to come into the country and work. But where are they going to live? Now, once again, the story. The Indians that came over, they huddled together. The Africans that came up to the country, they huddled together. The West Indians, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, and all the other countries that they huddled together, and they ended up huddling in slums in some cases, They ended up becoming slum-like. They didn't know, they couldn't venture out into the bigger wide world because they were scared. There might have been racism, they might have been attacked. There was, racial issues, and so they congregate to certain areas. The Notting Hills, the
Notting
Peckham,
Hill, yep.
The Southall's and the Sloughs, and
Brixton,
and do you get what I mean? And the different areas, they all muddled together, and then they slowly made their way out into the bigger wide world. But ultimately, the government just could not build as many houses as they possibly could. But again, that was by design. So we get to the Reagan Thatcher era, 70s, 80s. We've got all of these big industries that she privatizes, sells them off.
Remember the prefab houses?
Yes. I remember those prefab houses. There were some in South London, and there were usually allotments near them, weren't there? Usually get them with an allotment, it was the good life.
They were knocked up very easily and quickly, obviously, for the same
riddled
reason.
with asbestos.
Oh yeah.
Sad, but actually accurate. So then obviously with the Reagan and the Thatcher era in this country, in the UK, she saw the ability to empower the family by selling the home with the right to buy scheme. But also she saw the benefit of having people in a perpetual debt. And there was a trade-off. She could see, I want you to own your home. So she really plugged owning your own home, because that would help national debt. At the end of the day, you own your home, you'll go to work. During the 70s, lots of people striked. Lots of people striked. If it wasn't the miners, it was the buses. It was the unions had so much power. It was unbelievable how much power the unions had. But in many ways, it was justified. They weren't being paid enough. They could see a divide with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer back in the 70s, and they would strike. And if they striked, they would shut down. You would have blackouts. If you were a coal man and you just
3-day weeks.
If you just down tools, there would be no coal. You wouldn't be heating your house. So Margaret Thatcher, smart as she was, and I do take my hat off because she was an intelligent woman and she had intelligent people around her. They said, if you take away their ability to strike, they won't. And the only way to do that is to make sure they lose something if they do. Now, it's one thing to pay a council and strike, because, hey, it's very difficult to get someone out of a council property. You have to go to court, and that costs a lot of money. It costs thousands of pounds to take someone to court to evict them. Thousands of pounds, which they didn't want to spend. But if you defer on your mortgage, suddenly that's the bank's responsibility. And the banks have lots of money, and they will happily evict you from your property because they can sell your property and make more money. Now, when those people started striking, and then suddenly they weren't getting paid, now they're sitting thinking, I can't allow my wife and my kids to not be in a home. I need them to be working. I need to be working. I need to be making money. So
you remember terms like an Englishman's house is his castle.
Yeah.
So these things are to get us to be attached to that property.
Exactly. And so that's what. So you imagine that you've got these guys who beforehand would have striked. Yep, down tools. I ain't having it. I ain't working.
Just don't pay your rent. That's
now. And then guess what? It's going to take. And then keeping in mind that the court will probably go, right, you need to pay your rent. Slap on the wrist, and you pay it. Game over. Now it's the bank says, if you defer on your mortgage, you're going to lose your house. And the council ain't going to rehouse you. They don't need to. You're out. Once you leave the council, you never get back in. You either stay with the council forever, or make sure that you never have to go back.
Yeah.
So you imagine that this is now the world that we are living in, that you've got privatized, you know, the grand heights, the electricities, the gas, telecoms, and all the other big massive conglomerates are now privatized. Those people are now home owners because of the right to buy, but they're still not building enough houses. And this is amazing. It's just literally one of those things where I read it, what I'm about to say in the next couple of minutes, then I had to read it again to understand what I just read, and then I was like, this is crazy. This is crazy. Like, more people must know this, right? More people must be aware that this is the case.
Are you unraveling the by design part?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So basically, as we said, many of the houses that Margaret Thatcher, under her regime and the subsequent, Major and all the other prime ministers after her up until Labour came in, they didn't build enough houses, and it was a boom time. Yeah. We'd already talked about in a previous conversation about going off the gold standard. So now there's more money in the economy. Those houses that were sold for £6,000 and £30,000 are now worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. Hundreds of thousands of pounds. We're talking council properties that are now worth £1 million. When they were a council property, they were like, yeah, next to nothing. If you bought a council property in Wimbledon, you were laughing, because have you seen the houses of prices? Houses in Wimbledon now,
Exactly.
they're over £1 million, £1.5 million easy. But a lot of those houses were built for social housing. They were built by the councils. So whilst this is running, as in house prices are increasing, rents for ordinary homes are also going up. So imagine it. It used to be, and you remember this, it used to be that if you couldn't afford your mortgage deposit, you'd rent for a little while to save up the deposit.
Yeah.
Because that's how it was. It was, you rented, you might say, oh, I only need to rent for 2 years.
Well, it
and
was a
every
cheaper
month,
option, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a cheaper option. You rented, and then you put your money aside every month.
Yep.
And then you get to your goal, and you go into the bank, dunk, dunk, dunk. Hi, I've now got my 25k. I've now got my 25 grand.
Good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah.
That's not going anywhere now.
No, but this is what I'm saying. You now have your 25k because you saved for 2 years, and you go to the bank manager and you say, hello there, mate. I would like to be considered for a mortgage. Here are my credentials. I work. I earn this amount. I have this as a deposit. My credit score is fine because I haven't been messing about with credit. That was meant to be the plan. Yeah. Have you seen the cost of rent today?
Like I said before, talking to family in America, a lot that are in New York and stuff like that. So I'm comparing the prices, and New York, like a 1-bed properties are going for 2,000-3,000 a month.
I know, it's insane.
Manhattan, 10,000 a month to rent somewhere.
And this is the smasher. I spoke to a young lad that I work with, and he said to me that when he was looking for a property to rent with him and his girlfriend, he had to put upfront 1 year of 1 year's rent as the deposit.
What?
1 year, because he said that when he went there with the 3 months, someone had said, I'll give 6 months rent. So then when he said, okay, I'll give 9 months, so the other way around, it was, okay, then I'll give 12 months.
So this is like the renter's version of gazumping.
100%. So imagine it now. He is having to give away his ability to buy a house because he's having to pay a year up front. And I think that's obscene. When I heard that, I just said to myself, I'm kind of glad that I'm older than you, that I haven't had to experience that nonsense. Because if I had experienced that nonsense, I'd probably want to shoot myself because it's great. It's crazy, and that's when that's why partly we're talking about it today, because I was listening to his reason and as he was speaking to me, and I thought, yeah, but that's you're meant to be renting for a little while so that then you can afford your mortgage, so that you can afford, you can put money down. You and your girlfriend are both working, so you can both save and save and save, and then you can buy somewhere. Well, no, because he's now had to give all that away just to rent.
Well,
Now,
I've seen open days for rentals. So, like normally you'd have an open day for a property, like to buy an open house. People are
yeah,
doing that for rent. And
yeah,
there was it was
crazy.
somewhere in West London the other day,
Yeah,
and there was a queue going around the
yeah,
block of
yeah.
people trying to get this property to rent.
And
It's
keep,
gone
yeah, it's not
crazy.
crazy.
It's
And
gone mad.
keeping in mind that, as I said from the very beginning, if you do not have enough supply, that is going to increase demand. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's as simple. It is as simple as that. If you do not match the demand with supply, then prices invariably have to go up because there will be competition for what's left. That is simple economics, right? That, to be honest with you, that's kind of basic. Well, imagine if the government that you are paying your taxes to is doing that on purpose. On purpose. And you think, come on, why would they be doing that on purpose? We're going to get to that. But before we do,
Mm.
I've realized now that if you are a young person, if you've just finished your degree, uni, and you're coming out into the big wide world, and you're now starting to, you've spent a lot of time studying, you spent a lot of time building up a debt, because so before you even think about, oh, I now want to buy a home, you've got to think of a way of paying off your student loan, or you've got to be
So,
thinking,
so th- for me, this isn't something. This is just a statement, really,
yeah,
or it's a question. What's the incentive for the young today?
well,
What's their
you're right,
incentive?
yeah. So in answer to that question, it's going to be very difficult. There's a trade-off, I think personally. This is where I probably show my opinion,
Mm.
but there is a trade-off, and I said the government, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because that's where I sort of unraveled and thought, I can't be the only one that knows this. There's got to be other people out there that have worked this one out and have gone, yeah, that ain't right.
Could it be this simple as well? Is it
It's it's very sorry. So that again,
is it just this simple? The economics of it is what.
it's not just the economics. It
Mm.
is. It's right. So just bear with me.
Yeah, yeah.
So young people are going to be the most affected because of what's been going on for the last 100 years. The young people today, they are the worst it's ever been, because we're at the stage now where there has to be a change. We've got to the point of max. You know, if you consider the mortgage game as a Ponzi scheme, if you imagine it as a Ponzi scheme, you are always going to need new buyers to
Yep.
continually perpetuate that market. If
Yep.
you don't have new buyers at the bottom, the Ponzi scheme will fail. It has to fail. It can. There is nothing. There is absolutely no way it can't fail, which is part of the reason why the housing market makes no sense. Because for the last 20 years, we have inflated the markets with funny money. The housing bubble should have exploded 25, 30 years ago, but it didn't, because we artificially inflated the market with more money. So what happened was we didn't need new buyers. We just needed new money. We didn't need the young. We sacrificed the young in our quest for money. In our, I'm talking about not even my generation, not even our generation. We're young. The generation, the older home generation, who have benefited the most from the low interest rates, the cheap housing,
Boomers, yeah.
the boomers, they benefited so much that they sacrificed their young. They ate their children, man. And I know, I'm probably going to get a thumb down for this. They did. They ate their children, and they didn't even realize it because now in that Ponzi scheme, as long as we print money, the Ponzi scheme can carry on. But the housing market should have corrected about 30 years ago, and it would have stopped houses going to the astronomical costs that they are at. Astronomical.
But what it feels like is that it's a system that is continually feeding on itself, like that image of a snake that's eating its own tail kind of felt.
Yeah,
because the funny money that you're talking about inflates the house prices.
Yeah,
the people who own the property can then either take equity out or sell, buy more property with the equity or whatever the case may be. But either way, they earn from it, and then the cycle continues because that money is just transferring to the wealthy. It's just going upwards, basically. There's
exactly.
No
that
distribution.
Divide is getting bigger.
Yeah.
When Reagan talked about trickle down economics, trickle down economics will only work in his head because it doesn't trickle down.
It's never trickled down.
It doesn't trickle down. It stops at a point and goes no further because they don't want it to. Why would you want to not earn more money? Why would you
basically the politicians, they've got like zero incentive to change anything.
Yes. So at the moment, because the thing is, there's multiple things going on at the moment. Money printing, which is artificially inflating the housing market. So when there should be a correction, there isn't. Millions of people today should be in negative equity because they've bought their houses for so much more than they're worth. But because of the supply and demand disconnect,
it's a seesaw, isn't it?
The house prices are going to just keep going up because there's now a buildup of people that want limited houses, and if the government built more houses, there'd be more supply. Houses would be allowed to correct, and there would be a correction. But you also have people buying houses and flats as an investment. So there are swathes of building complexes, gated communities that are empty, and they've been bought by foreign money as an investment. So you build, back in the day, it was the Russian oligarch would build a gated community, for 8 flats, gated community, 2 parking spaces each because they don't need a garden anymore, just a car park, right? And then they would sell off those houses, but actually those houses are empty, or those flats, those apartments are empty. No one's in them because they weren't bought for you to live in them. They were bought as an investment. But the problem being is those apartment prices will affect the cost of the properties around them. So if this house is now worth 280 grand, if this flat is now worth 580 grand, your house is now worth 580 grand. But it was never worth that much. But because it's being traded like a commodity, prices have gone up. Now, when, as I said, the young people that we have today, they're crazy. Don't get me wrong. They live a very different lifestyle to what we would have thought of. But I still feel sorry for them because I still think, well, why wouldn't they live that crazy lifestyle? They've got nothing to look forward to. They're not, even when they become responsible adults, even when they start reproducing themselves, having kids and settling down, they are going to be generation rent because they won't be able to afford to buy their own property. Now, yeah, for some of them, they are lucky if mum and dad own their home. Because if mum and dad own their own home, mum and dad may be able to help them with a deposit to be able to buy a house. But the current trend of the statistics that I've noticed is that most of those parents, a large number of those parents, never ever got to buy their own home either. So it's much harder for the child to be able to buy a property because their parent didn't buy a property. So it's up to them to be able to save up enough money. I mean, if they get a great job, fantastic. If they get a good job and they are able to pay for the a deposit, brilliant. They're on the ladder. They can crack on. But the likelihood is most of those young they can't afford it. So when I said to you earlier on, it can't be this. It can't be this. This is where it becomes a little bit of a conspiracy theory, a little bit of my own personal opinion, and based with a little bit of fact. So hear me out. The Conservative government, and I'm picking on them at the moment, but they're not the only ones. Obviously, all of the political parties will look after their own. But specifically, I can actually go have data that says this is what they did. The Conservative government will look after the wealthy, however they can to keep themselves in power. They will have to look after them. Voters will vote for the party that looks after them the most, right? So the Conservative Party looks after the wealthy. Well, the wealthy in our modern life is the homeowner. The homeowner is the wealthy one. It's not the renter, it's the homeowner. So it's in their best interest to keep the homeowner happy. And the only way to do that, if you want to stay in power, is to make sure that that homeowner's house price only goes in one direction, which is up. So, and this is where the research that I found just blew my mind. A study was conducted in I'm going to find it now. A study was conducted in 2006. It was called the Calcutt Review of Housing Building Delivery. It was published in 2007. Now, the Calcutt report noted that there was a failure of the home building industry to increase the supply in response to price signals. So when you go into the when you click on that and actually go into it, it basically says that the home building industries are all conservative donors. So in other words, they are intrinsically linked within the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm.
And the government have said to them, build houses. We need you to build houses, but just don't build too many. Because we know that the more houses you build, the more it will affect our voters. Because the one thing you don't want to do is burn the people that are going to be voting you back in. So imagine it. Government, your big housing companies that are building bucket loads of houses all over the place and this, that, and the other are in cahoots and have literally joined together to build houses, but limit how quickly you build them. Because if you build too many, your price is going to go down. If you build just enough, you keep demand and supply out of kilter, and which means it will artificially keep the price at that level.
And to tie that back into what you was talking about earlier, about how they designed 12 homes within a square per acre or whatever.
Yeah.
That sounds like the type of calculated mind that says, if we build 126,000 homes a year, then we can get away with keeping the house price at such and such a percentage.
I would suggest anybody that has any, if you want to, just download the Calcutt Review. It's a bit of a boring read, but if you read it, you will understand that there is a design to why you and I, our children, literally will struggle to be able to purchase a home, because you have to beat the system. And the only way to beat the system in the current format will be almost regime change. It's gonna, like, literally,
Yeah.
there is no other option. But
But
if you
what that says to me is that the rentier class is still in control.
you're still in control, yeah, they gave
But
us a
they've just given
little
you
bit
a
of
little bit
a
so
little
that
way. Oh yeah, you
you'd
can
have,
buy your home. Oh, thank
yeah,
you. I'm so glad I can buy my home. I'm
yep,
so glad. But
yep,
what about my children?
yep.
What about my children's children? What are they going to do? How are they going to get up on the ladder?
It's
But
like your
then,
job just paying you just enough to come back tomorrow. Do you
yeah,
know what I
but
mean?
then you
Yeah.
start to realize this is an experiment. This is just
Mm,
a social experiment with ownership, keeping in mind that the governments that we have at the moment, if you look at a statistic, I can't remember the exact figure of but young people today are not voting Conservative. They're not voting Labour. They've lost interest completely, which to
apathy.
me says, yeah, there is apathy there, which to me says that eventually all of those Tory donors and all of those Conservative voters, they're going to be too old, and there's not going to be enough of them. At the bottom of the triangle with the young people, they will probably start creating their own parties. And I would imagine that right now in the grassroots, there are young people who are activists. There's young people.
That's already happening. That's already
Exactly.
happening.
They're
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
starting to
Hmm.
build up the momentum to have a party, because once they get into their minds that for us to make it better for not me, for if I was a young person, my generation, I need to knock them off their perch, and the only way that's going to happen is to go into parliament and actually make those changes. Now it's going to be difficult, because under the current system, nothing's going to change. This Conservative government isn't going to suddenly go, oh yeah, do you know what? We're going to start screwing over homeowners. They're not. They're not going to do that. They don't. They need us to vote them back in.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
can't afford for us to go, oh no, I'm going to go to Labour because Labour helps the poor, or New Labour just helps the rich as much as the Conservatives do. And we know that. You and
Yeah.
I know that the parties that we have at the moment are just looking after themselves,
Well, they're not fit for purpose anyway. Let's
not
be
fit for
honest.
purpose.
For the majority of people.
But ultimately, if a young person today is going to want to be able to start a family and be able to live in a home that he's paid for and he's working hard towards, he has to look at the ballot box. He's got to look at Parliament. He's got to look at how can I change the dynamic here? How am I going to be able to, I've watched other people on YouTube where they say, oh, we need to go to the politicians and force them to, tax the rich more. No, ain't gonna work. Because why would they tax their donors? Why would they want to tax the people that are looking after?
Short of a revolution,
Yeah,
you kind of got to just move these guys out of the way.
yeah.
You're
But
gonna
I
have to
think
move them out of the
that
way.
time will do that because they'll get old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Over
You know,
time,
they'll
over time.
they will eventually end up in the House of Lords and they'll
But
be irrelevant.
I don't know if the youngsters are going to wait that that time.
Well, no, I don't know. I see what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean in
Do you know
terms
what I
of
mean?
like, well, if they are ready to take that on, then that would be amazing, and it would be very interesting to see how this works. But in terms of home ownership, if we follow the same system as is right now, young people just will not be able to afford a property.
Well,
They,
the trend is reversing, because just before the 2008 crash, so in 2007, the home ownership was nearly 75%.
yeah.
It's now 65%.
I thought, okay, 65%. So it's And what's interesting is that more and more older ones our age,
Mm.
maybe a divorce, maybe a you know illness, maybe change of lifestyle, they've had to go back to renting.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? It's not just, oh, I've bought my house now and I'm sitting pretty. No, you bought your house, and for the next 30 plus years, it's blood, sweat, and toil. You've got to make sure you keep those payments going so that you can at the end of it say, yeah, I own it. And it's kind of sad because you realize that 30 years is a long time in your life to devote to one thing that you may not enjoy for when you've retired and yes, I own my house, and then but you're so old you can't enjoy it. Or do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
You've now you've
Well,
used.
the youngsters now who are lucky enough to get on the ladder are
Yeah,
spending nearly half of their salary
wage.
each month.
Yeah. And
That's
so if
that's
do you remember
that's
we said
crazy.
before that if you're spending half of your wage just to be on the ladder,
Mm.
it is not in your interest for the Bank of England or the Federal Reserve or wherever to increase the interest rate, because a 1% increase on your mortgage could be the difference between you eating and not eating.
Yeah.
A 2% increase would be the difference between you having to downsize your car. You may not be able to have. You may only have to have one car. You may have to take public transport. A 3% increase, you may have to now rethink your gym membership and
But
your
that balancing act again
yeah,
is
you're going to be constantly doing that.
yeah.
4%, you're going to lose, because those are the numbers. They're big numbers. They're massive. You can't, um, the for the last 20. I think I said it to you before. I work with people who have never had an interest increase in their mortgage. They've never. That's never been a. That's not a concept they're aware of. That because for the last 20 odd years or however long it is that we've, I don't know, no, not 20 years. Is it like 10 years? We've been at some really crazy zero interest.
Yeah. There
I
was
don't know how long we've had it.
it's gone up a few percent in the last sort of couple of years.
Yeah,
But
but do you know what I mean? Like
before that, yeah, it
for the
was
longest time,
damn near
they
zero.
weren't aware that that was a thing.
Mm, mm,
It is pretty crazy.
mm.
So, what would you say? What bit of advice would you then give to someone watching this right now and thinking, "Oh man, you've just been doom and gloom for a whole hour. Where's the light? What's the one thing they can get out of this that will make them happy that they actually watch this show?"
Working abroad. I, I, I don't know, man. All I would say is that the way things are, I
Yeah,
think we are beyond. Like you said, we are at max,
yeah,
so therefore they are going to have to start reversing some things. And touching on the conspiracy thing again, I think the Labour will be in next year at some point, and I think you're going to see them start to undo things because we have hit that point that nothing can really move. Nothing. We're
but
at stalemate.
don't you think they're just the same? Like,
They are, but they're going to have to do something because, like you said before, um, the whole housing market is dependent on first time buyers.
yeah,
Now they've created funny money, yes, but that Ponzi scheme is blown up now.
hmm
So therefore, you're going to have to do something about the housing market, right?
yeah,
Because the funny money, you're not going to just keep plugging the funny money because it's no longer cheap to just keep taking that and shoving it into the financial industry and the
yeah,
housing industry, right? So they're going to have to do something, whether it's house building for social housing.
hmm
Um, there will be a slight correction in the housing market.
You
So
think only slight?
I don't think there'll be a crash. Like I said, the rentier class own it all, so they're never going to allow for a crash. I think these things are kind of manipulated to a certain degree. So
Yeah,
therefore, even a 20-30% correction is still, that might be seen as a crash
Mhm.
to some people, but it would allow people to get back on the ladder. They're probably, I don't know if they're going to lower interest rates anytime soon. I can't see that.
I think it will all depend on. I mean, obviously, interest rates are going up to control inflation. Inflation at some point will be under control.
Yeah.
And then then they can then ease off.
Yeah.
You know.
I noted down a few things that if I was in charge, what I would do. The first thing is I would bring in a rent cap. So
Yeah.
rent controls, like what you
But
had.
they have that in
You know,
Europe. I think Germany has a rent cap.
yeah, they
Yeah.
used to have it in New York. I don't know if they
Mhm.
still have it, but back in the day they used to have that. We definitely need a rent cap, rent controls
Mhm.
to help out the young people. You can tailor make it however you want it. So whether it's young people starting out, they can't pay more than X amount or whatever the case is, or based on your earnings, for
Mhm.
example. Yeah. The social housing, they've got to start building like crazier than post World War II.
Yeah.
You know, so 100,000 a year again is, like you said, to keep this equation in balance, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to have to. Well, I would smash that model obviously, and I would build a lot more. But you can't. If you're in charge of it all, would you build so much that would engineer a crash? Would you do that?
No. What?
So you
I
couldn't,
mean,
could you?
if you're talking about what would be the solution, it's a
Mm.
very difficult one. I think, as you said, I would build more houses to. I would. It wouldn't be a crash. It would be a gentle contraction. So what I would like to see is, you can't tell me that a house that was bought, that was sold for 100,000 20 years ago is now 1.5 million. I would rein that in.
Hmm.
Um, the reason why it would be a controlled one is because the person that lives in that house is paying a mortgage at that figure,
Yeah.
and they'll be wiped out if they would be in negative equity for their entire mortgage if you completely crashed it. That to me, I don't think is fair either. But I think that I think make
That fits into like my third point. I'm
oh, go
touching
on.
on my third point. Sorry. Foreign ownership limits.
Yeah,
There would need to be limits on how, there are. I think if you go over Northwest London, you've got Bishop's Avenue, which is Billionaires Row, right?
yeah,
You go along there, and if you're driving down there in the evening, none of the houses have any lights on.
mm,
These are 25 million pound houses,
mm,
10 million pound houses. Nobody's in because no one lives there.
yeah,
These are mansions that were just bought as an investment
mm,
vehicle, and it sits there. And because of the way that this market works, they could buy it 2010 for 10 million, and then when they sell in 2020, they're selling it for 20 million,
yeah.
and they've not done anything to it.
No, but
So
and yeah, you're right.
you've got to take some of this away. Um,
So you would cap
I would
rent,
cap
you would
rent,
cap in foreign investment at for as
yeah,
a yeah,
and definitely build more social housing. But the foreign investment is, again, you have to, because if you have a foreign company, an offshore company,
mhm.
you can buy property in this country and not pay stamp duty,
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah. Or if you
right?
buy not, is it if you buy 7 in a row, or there's a ruling that if
There's a
you buy
whole bunch of little
yeah, I think you
loopholes,
can buy
right?
if you buy houses in blocks of 7 or
Yeah,
9, I can't remember now the exact number. So there's I think it's is it the health secretary? He's known for that. There's someone in politics that I can't think who it is now.
oh, Jeremy Hunt. It's
I think
Jeremy
it's
Hunt.
Hunt. I think
Yeah.
he's the one that's where I think I heard it that they said, oh, if you buy houses in blocks of, so obviously he's buying new builds,
Yep.
buying them in blocks, he's got no stamp duty, then renting them at the market value, which is this is the
Yep.
thing you gotta what you don't, and I don't know if you remember, every government used to try and balance its books before it left. It would almost be like, well, we have got the national debt to zero, that kind of thing. We would try and make sure that we didn't leave the economy in a worse situation than when it was given to us.
Yep.
And what I remember thinking to myself was, we've lost that now. So it used to be, you can't throw a debt on an unborn baby. An unborn baby should not be paying for the debt that I've just created. And so in the same way that, with your insurances, if you die, your mortgage is paid out through the insurance. I feel like the spending nonsense that they say is, oh yeah, don't worry, but you're pushing it down the road to the unborn baby who will be born, will go to school, will grow up, and when it become an adult, will suddenly realize, you screwed it for me. Like, you haven't given me even an opportunity, a chance. We're talking about young people today who are working. What about the 5-year-old? What about my children? What are they going to have to do? Are they going to have to wait for me to die for them to be able to get on the housing ladder? What are they going to do?
But this goes back to what you were saying before about the politicians being in cahoots with
the
building company and building industries.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we're talking today, because there was the news in today about Grenfell, and they've settled some sort of civil compensation to the people. So 900 people whose lives were affected by Grenfell have been awarded something like 150 million pounds, right?
Oh, wow.
Well, you say that, but I mean that equates to about 160k per person.
What's that going to buy?
Right? But also, it's the fact that under this agreement, all of these people, the housing associations, the councils, the cladding companies, were all allowed to not have any liability. So they've been able to pay that as a slap on the wrist
and get away
with it, and no one is going to go to jail for it.
Keep in mind that they're probably insured, so
they're gonna claim that money back, no problem.
This is crazy, right?
And this speaks to the problem of what we're talking about.
Yeah,
do you see what I mean? And Grenfell is a perfect example of what we're talking about: social housing, and how the rich or the wealthy elites have treated the poor.
I think maybe, as you said, is you have to put into legislation like you said, we spoke about it before, about people would say tax the rich, that will even it out. It just ain't gonna work.
No, I think you can tax the rich.
It won't work. It just won't work.
Well, it won't work. It won't work because of who is in charge. And the system that's set up.
The avoidance. Remember, there are lawyers that literally get paid to, how can I avoid paying tax? Don't take away. Just be paying shares or something. Or I don't know.
The truth of it is that we would require a different type of politician, a different type of politics.
Yeah.
In order for things to really change. You're talking about yesterday's, how things used to be, and people being noble. Remember when people got caught doing wrong in politics, they would resign. Now they're dragged out kicking and screaming, right? So you need a different type of politician, different type of political class to be in charge before things are going to change. But I also think that the grassroots organizations are going to be the ones that are going to come up and effect change, personally speaking.
And it would be interesting to see just how that how that pans out. It will be exciting times, because they will literally be the rulers of the earth, and we will be there watching, going, wow, why didn't we do that?
True.
Why didn't we do that? So any concluding comments on another one great conversation between myself and LD? And as I said, if you haven't already, please hit that thumbs up.
Hit the thumbs up
and subscribe.
Subscribe
but
to
any
the channel.
concluding comments, LD?
Yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme, isn't it?
That is pretty much it. You know what? It's sad. We're laughing and we're joking, but this is people's lives. You know, how many people are miserable right now because they know that they might have taken home, you know, £2,000 for the month, and 1,100 of that has just gone on to
It's
just gone on
there.
rent. And if they're lucky, it's 1,100 quid. Sometimes, you know, when you're hearing like,
what was we saying before the other day about the mortgages? It was the multiplier was 3.5.
yeah,
And now
exactly.
they're at seven times your mortgage.
And
That's the That's
and
almost admitting that they know it's out of control.
yeah, and
That's
there's absolutely no way you cannot have a mortgage with those levels
it's not
and
sustainable.
have an interest and have a variable mortgage like
Yeah.
you that needs to be fixed for the entire 30 years.
That
Zero.
screamed Ponzi scheme to me,
Yeah.
mate. You know?
Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you found what we said informative. If, as I said, myself and LD, we're not, you know, gurus. We're not economists. We
Not
are
at
just
all.
average people who look at the news, do a bit of research, and we've had a conversation about it. It would be interesting to hear your opinions. What do you think of what we've said? If we're wrong, please let us know in the comments. You know, education you'll be teaching us, it'd be great for us to learn. And obviously it's really, really good. As you know, the algorithm, it's nice when you get those thumbs up and you get a bit of, you know, bit of conversation. We learn every time we do a video. If there's a subject you think you'd like us to talk about, please drop it in the comments and let us know, and we will work out and have a conversation about it. But if there's anything else you would like to share, if not, then I think we will call it a day. So take care and watch out for our next video. We do a video pretty much every Sunday. So check this one out and watch this space. Take care, guys.
Peace.